Alrighty, awesome. Well, welcome everybody to episode 20 of the Break Even Brothers podcast. I got to say, it's pretty impressive, Brad. I'm giving ourselves a pat on the back.
Yeah, pretty epic. Big 2-0. We have some merch. I know we talked about it in a different episode, but I'll have to showcase merch maybe for episode 21. It's something that I think our viewers will be very, very excited about. One of a kind limited item, but don't want to speak too much on it right now.
Nice way to sell it. Awesome. Well, it's the day after a nice holiday weekend. Did you do anything fun over the weekend?
Nothing crazy. Watched a movie, did some cleaning. Honestly, a pretty chill weekend. I got a lot of work done for Split My Expenses, which I've been dying to do. I think I even said the same thing last podcast episode. I'm building up the kind of momentum of getting the mobile app out there. I told myself end of this first half of the year, and if you look at the calendar, it's coming around very quick. So did some fun life stuff, but outside of that, I think I'm pretty happy to report that I've made significant progress on the mobile app. And I won't go too deeply into the pod, but working on some of the data syncing side, which is how the iPhone app keeps up to date with kind of the server side data source. So there's a whole bunch of technologies out there for it. Super complicated, but yeah, I'll stop there. How's your weekend?
No, it's good. Yeah, that's cool to hear. Yeah, good weekend. Worked a bunch too, but in a fun way, which I'm super excited to talk about because I was working on stuff not for the podcast. I was working on stuff that would be fun to talk about on the podcast. So coming into this one with a lot of energy and yeah, ready to roll. I think we'll have a good episode this one. So
yeah, it's been a whirlwind. I feel like these past 2 weeks have shown us that things don't stop in the AI race. It's only getting better and better, and it's exciting being kind of in this space today, and even the past 6 months. I think it's just super awesome to see what companies are putting out there, and like we say, it's just going to get better from here. So yeah, super excited.
Yeah, totally. Well, I think we wanted to kick this episode off with a fun little challenge of a blind ranking of AI apps. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about how we're going to do that?
Yeah, so I've seen this trend on TikTok. It's not necessarily used for AI things, but I wanted to apply it to our podcast. So basically, it's blind ranking. So you don't know, the kind of the category of the list, but you don't know what's exactly in the list that you're guessing. So today we're going to do a blind ranking of our 10 AI chat apps. So I've asked AI to essentially come up with a list of 10 of these options. I've handed it off to our editor, Ellen, in the back room, and she is going to present us a current chat app, and me and Ben are going to have to work together to place it. So 1 being the best AI chat app and 10 being the worst. Again, we don't know what's coming, so we'll need to work together to kind of place these. And yeah, we'll see where we end up, and we'll share it. So let's kick it off with that. Ellen has put it into our chat. Perplexity AI. So Ben, what do you think?
I've seen it a bunch. I haven't used it myself. I see it usually on X. People be like, ask Perplexity and explain it. Yeah, so I'm gonna give it a 7. I haven't used it, but I'm just going off of where I've seen it.
Okay, that's fair. I also agree. I see it on Twitter. People tag the Perplexity like AI bot, and it basically will just take a look at the tweet, kind of explain it or summarize it or whatnot. I think it used to be pretty good from what I've heard. Now that other AI chat apps have integrated web search in the past 2 months, I think it's definitely lower on the list. So I would also go 5, probably not terrible. So I'm okay doing 7 or 8.
Let's book it for 7, I think.
Okay, 7 it is. All right, let's see what we got next. Replica. Okay, I'm not sure I've heard of this one. Have you heard of this?
No, I haven't. So
okay, just to be fair, we asked AI to come up with an AI list, and this was using GPT's O3 model with web search. So this is probably a valid AI chat app. However, me and Ben have no clue what this is. So for that reason alone, it's going number 10. What do you think?
Number 10? I was going to go number 9 just to save it for maybe one that I know sucks.
Okay, okay. Let's go 9. I don't know what that is. Okay, read that one out for us.
Gemini, so obviously Google's product. I'm feeling it's number 1 or 2 for me right now.
Ooh, hot take. Yeah, it's actually really good. They made it a lot better. I think they came out with it quite a while ago, but over the past few months, the Gemini team has invested more resources into AI Studio, and it's a really good interface to paste in a ton of text. It takes in audio, it takes in files. It integrates with Google Drive. Huge win. You can do big files. Honestly, it's definitely top 3, if not top 2 for me as well. I do feel number one, it's hard to give up. So I'm probably going to slot it for 2. I imagine ChatGPT is in the list, which could be a top contender as well. I think that's likely what it might end up as. But what do you think? 2, 1, 3?
Well, I'm including like all of Google's AI like products in this because they have something called Notebook LM, which I think you and I have
Hmm.
exchanged texts about, which is super cool. I've been playing with that a bunch lately. So for that reason, I would go number one, but number two, I would understand too. So I'm
Okay.
not gung ho on either one.
I think I put a slight caveat here that I think AI Studio is very geared towards developers. It's a power tool for developers and people who are very tech savvy, where I think something like a chat AI app should probably be a little bit more dumbed down, but powerful. So for that, I'd probably lean towards 2 because I assume ChatGPT is in the list and it's likely headed that direction. So if you're okay with it, I'm gonna
I'm
slot
good
it at
with it.
2. Okay.
Yeah, let's do it.
A solid product from Google. Honestly, it's a killer. Okay, interesting. So we got Copilot from Microsoft, and I think I don't know if I'd classify it as a chat AI app. I think Copilot is a very muddied name in the Microsoft product space.
Mhm.
There's GitHub Copilot, kind of the editing experience IDE. There's Copilot built into the Windows OS, I think, which is kind of like a Siri or something. And I don't know. I think there's a Copilot on Bing search too. Do you know which one this might be referring to?
Yeah, I read that as the GitHub version, but then also as like the one that comes with your Microsoft 365
Hmm.
subscription, which is it's just bad. Like it's in my experience,
Okay.
it's pretty horrible. So
I've
I
heard
was
it's
thinking
bad.
8. I was thinking 8 on that
Okay.
one.
Okay. I'm
Yeah.
okay. Let's slot it 8 because I've also seen screenshots online of people asking it to do rudimentary things and it just cannot compute. And it's something that's built directly into the product. So I think 8 is reasonable for if you're going to integrate an AI model into like an AI chat and it can't operate on things that its core product is, it's probably not very good.
Well, and I would just add one thing with that too. A lot of times companies are either like a Google workspace or they're Microsoft. And in my
Hmm.
experience, it's been a lot of Microsoft. Windows, Excel, all that fun stuff. And so I feel like they have a ton of potential, but they just have not been able to like
Yeah.
translate that into, whereas like Google Workspace is killing it. Like again, Gemini is amazing. Notebook LM is really cool. Google Docs, Google Sheets, it's all kind of,
It's getting
I'm
there.
seeing it more and more. Yeah. And like they have a much better AI kind of built into that system. So like Microsoft could have done that, but so far it's not been good. So
Yeah.
just my
Yeah.
experience.
Cool. And then next up, we got Grok. So this is Twitter's uh, or XAI is what they call it, their chat AI app. And this one, honestly, it's pretty good. It's my top 5 for sure. For me personally, it has really good web search. So if I ask it to do something like trip planning, it will scrape like 60 or 80 web pages for me. Have a nice summary. It's very DeepSeek like. So if you use DeepSeek chat, it kind of feels similar. It has good thinking tokens. I think it doesn't handle files, or at least I haven't tried it. So I think that might be a slight knock, but it does have the Twitter data source, kind of like fetching tweets and doing all that is kind of an underpinning data source that other companies are a little bit harder to access.
Yeah, I haven't used it at all, so I have to kind of recuse myself from that.
Okay.
The only thing, my only like bias, I guess, is that like Twitter can be such a cesspool sometimes that like
Hmm.
I would kind of just shy away from it just for that alone. But again, haven't used it. Sounds like it's pretty good. I'm happy wherever you
Okay.
put
So
it.
I will place it then. I think since I go to it and I use it, that is a strong indicator that it's a part of my arsenal. Where it exactly fits, we have, 3 through 6 open. I think I'm gonna place it at 4, and I think
Okay.
because I can, I'm thinking what's coming. I'm thinking that's a good spot for it. So I'm gonna slot it as 4. Solid app. If you haven't used it, definitely try it out. It's impressive.
Oh,
Ooh,
Quora. Poe, sorry, Poe, which I guess is built by Quora. It's a shame that 9 and 8 are taken because I feel like I feel like this might. I'm saving number 10 for one. I hope it's on there though. That's my thought. I never used
yeah.
it. Have you used it?
I have not. I mean, I've heard about it. I think it came out very early in the AI life cycle, so I'm not sure if they still, actively push it or what its status is. No one that I know uses it or talks about it. So yeah, 10 is open, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, anything past 5 is not great. So we have 5, 6, and 10 so far reserved. Yeah,
I
6 or
mean,
10 for sure.
it feels wrong to put it above Perplexity because like I've seen that used and like it seems like
Yeah,
it's decent.
yeah.
But man, there's one at 10 where if it comes up, I'm gonna be upset that we gave 10 away. But I feel like for that reason, just by the way this game is played, I think we have to do 10. It can't be better than Perplexity.
I'm not understanding what your 10 might be, and don't tell me because I'm curious, but let's roll 10 with this because, I mean,
Yeah.
Replica should probably be 10 at this point, but we didn't know it was coming, which is the fun of the game.
Yeah. Pi. And
Okay.
I never heard of this one either. Yeah,
I've also not heard of this one. So Pi from Inflection. So I think when we had talked about chat AI apps, maybe this is getting a little bit reaching, and maybe this exists, but maybe not a ton of people use it. Sadly, we have filled up our back half almost at this point. So I think by default, since we don't know it, we don't use it, it's got a slot 6, which hurts a little bit because I've heard of Copilot and Perplexity, which are existing at 7 and 8. So what do you think about 6?
That's got to be 6. Yeah. I mean,
okay. Yeah. I hate
never
to do
heard of
it. Okay. Big hitter. ChatGPT, OpenAI, first to market. Some would say the best Mac OS app out there, iPhone app as well. First class experience. I'll just stop there. What do you think?
Yeah, I think just for ease of use and options and like all the things it can do, I'm going number 1. To me, it could have been Gemini or ChatGPT for number 1.
Mm-hmm.
But I think ChatGPT, I mean, has all the different models. It's got, if we're just talking about OpenAI in general, I guess this is specific to chat apps, but yeah, it's got the most widespread adoption, ease of use, different levels of models, kind of depending on what you're looking for. Deep research is amazing in my experience.
Mm-hmm.
So
voice mode as well. Like I got some cool features out there. So yeah, I think it's easy. We're biased. ChatGPT, if you're not using it as your chat AI app, please get with the times and download and try it out.
Yep.
Okay.
And I guess chat teams, I think we've mentioned this before, but chat teams does not train on your data, which is great for enterprise use.
Yeah, they've definitely changed that. Cool. And then we have Claude from Anthropic. So another incredible tool. I was expecting to slot this in my top 3, and I luckily number 3 is open in our list.
Yep.
That's an easy placement for me, but I'll let you comment on that.
Yeah, number 3. I think that the top 3 I think is perfect. I think wouldn't touch a thing. Yeah.
Good job, us. Good job.
Yeah. Claude is pretty solid. The MCP stuff is really cool. I don't use it much anymore, but like it seems like it's really good for like what it like the MCP thing at least is kind of my last kind of dabble in it. And yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah, one last question before we get to the final chat app. Any guesses for what number 10 might be before we get it revealed?
Well, number 5. Okay, yeah.
Sorry, yeah. The last one on the list.
No, I have no idea because I've heard of so many ones I know. Either. I don't know. Yeah.
I'm not sure. Ellen, hit us with the last one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Character.ai. I never heard of it.
Okay, I've heard of it. Was a huge market share. I think maybe middle of last year, or late last year, they were like neck and neck, I think, with ChatGPT because people wanted to talk to AI apps. It's kind of like Character AI. The product was you could talk to AI agents that had personas and profiles, and it was just kind of having a friend online virtually. So I think it is a chat AI app. I think we were thinking more productivity focused. This is more entertainment category. Given we only have number 5, it's going to slot as number 5. And if we take a look at the list, I think we didn't do too bad. So I'll slot that in at number 5. And then maybe you can give us the rundown of what you think and what our final list looks like.
Yeah, I think 1 through 4. Again, I've only heard good things about Grok. I just haven't used it. So I think 1 through 4 is pretty solid. Honestly, I think Perplexity is the only one that's probably out of place in my opinion. That should probably be 5. But then the rest I think is pretty good. The one that I thought was coming out, I guess if we go top to bottom, ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, XAI or Grok, Character.ai, Pi by Inflection. That's Pi, like the math pi, not Apple Pie. Perplexity AI, Copilot, Replica, and Poe by Quora. So that's our final 10.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think the only one that's really out of order there is probably Perplexity, and the rest can pretty much stay the same.
Yeah,
the one that the one that I thought was, I guess it's not chat, but I was just gonna poo on Apple Intelligence because that just seems like it's just such a lost opportunity, and
yeah,
I don't know if they're gonna be able to recover or catch up from how just poor that is right now.
Yeah, I'm surprised DeepSeek didn't make the list, but I'd probably put that on there, and then maybe Apple as well. So interesting to see what O3 came up with as a chat AI app, and I was the one who prompted it. And as we all know, prompts do matter. So maybe I can make a better one next time. But that was awesome. I think we did decent. I think top three we nailed it.
Hmm.
4 to 6, it's okay. Then we're definitely some unheard of ones. So that was fun.
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool.
Cool. All right. Well, it has been a jam-packed 2 weeks. Last time we recorded, I think, was early April, roughly 2 weeks ago. And since then, there's been a ton of releases. So I had just kind of opened up a little notepad for myself and wrote down a few of these from the kind of frontier AI model space. So just going down the list, we have OpenAI released two major releases probably the past 2 weeks. One is their GPT 4.1 models. And the unique thing about their 4.1 models is actually API only. So they're not releasing it on the Chat GPT app. And it's basically trained to use tools. And the trend of building agents and MCP servers and tools is that all these AI models were not previously trained to use tools. They were kind of retrofitted to use them after. Supposedly, GPT 4.1 and their other newer models are more equipped with training data sets that use tools. So they can kind of describe how to do that. So they came out with GPT 4.1, 4.1 mini, and 4.1 nano. And I think that is a kind of direct replacement to GPT 4.0, which has like 4.0 and 4.0 mini. And then their second two-parter release was O3 and O4 mini. And probably what you're thinking right now is, damn, it's hard to keep up with, which is what. And O2, O3, O5, and I'm with you. It's very complicated. I'd take a look at their models page multiple times, and I had to kind of put this together. But to kind of break it down, O3 is very intelligent, large model. O4 is pretty smart, but it's the mini version, so O4 mini. And these are all available on the API today, and I think O3 and O4 mini are available in the chat. And again, these are very good at tool calling. They have web search now, so it's a pretty solid offering from OpenAI. Super exciting. And then, yeah, so next step, Gemini. So we have 2.5 Flash. Google's been really killing it, as we've talked about in previous podcast episodes. If OpenAI releases something, Google releases the next day. If Google releases something, OpenAI comes the next day. So we had 2.5 Flash, and this is kind of the introduction of the thinking budget. So Google allows you to say, how much do you want this model to think? Previously, models were just, you asked a question, it responded. Now it has this internal thinking mechanism to get a higher quality response. And Google's allowing us to change that on a per request or per chat basis. And Google, kind of continuously wins this price per performance bucket with the generous free tier. So they're doing well to adopt AI for the masses for engineers. And will they keep us? Will their price per performance remain top of notch? Who knows? We'll see. And then we also have releases from Twitter. So like XAI, like we talked about earlier, they finally released Grok 3 and Grok 3 Mini, which power the Grok AI chat. Pretty similar to DeepSeek models. So again, like I talked about, they're really good at web search and good at thinking. And I don't use them on the API yet. And they're not, I think they're in Cursor and other AI IDEs, but definitely the OpenAI and Google Gemini models are what people are using today. And I think the big trend we're seeing is that benchmarks aren't becoming that useful anymore, which is a really weird thought. People get very tied up on, oh, there's a new release. How does it compare in the benchmarks? What is the raw numbers? We got 50 different benchmarks. Sounds useful, but I think at the end of the day, people are getting much more tied to vibes, which also sounds stupid, but it's very much a thing. And if you've kind of vibe coded before, I think you'll really understand it. But you can have a really good model on paper, but how well does it follow your instructions? How well does it understand you as a human? When we're writing prompts in some of these AI IDEs, they're not very pretty, typos, etc. And I think on these benchmarks, it's very structured, rigorous, and it's just a different environment. So I think the new trend is kind of emerging that benchmarks don't tell the full story. You can have a new model that comes out that's good, but not great on the benchmarks. It still performs well, which 6 months ago would sound like a completely backwards thought. So very interesting, huge releases, lots of stuff available in the API. And if you haven't tinkered with these in Cursor, if you're using Cursor or Windsurf, definitely try them out. It's very much what works for your use case. And I think Google I/O is like in a few weeks. There's going to be new stuff coming. Really excited to see this heat up. I think these past 2 weeks have been a real inflection point of extreme competition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the pace has been crazy. And, I think probably a month ago, I was using, ChatGPT pretty exclusively. And now, probably this last month, I've been using Gemini pretty much exclusively.
Yeah.
Also for the chat, but also in Cursor, doing some coding, which I have some stuff to update or share with this podcast. But it's pretty much all been using, the Gemini 2.5 Pro, I think is the one I'm
Pro,
using in
yeah.
Cursor. Yeah. And it's pretty remarkable. And I think one thing that it just takes time, and I think once people that have used different models a lot can see it, like they kind of respond in different ways. Like they're both maybe right on how to do something, but like Claude might answer something a different way than like how Gemini does, and it's really nuanced. Like I couldn't point out specifically what it is, but like I
Hmm.
did some stuff and I was asking Gemini, and for some reason Gemini kept timing out in Cursor, and so I just switched to Claude, and it gave me like still a right answer on something, but it was like just formatted differently. The response was just, the vibe was just different. What can you say? It was just different. So, but yeah, I mean, they're incredible. Just how good they are at what they do,
Yeah.
because you can get
And
so much done.
the cool thing is, if you have code written for OpenAI, lots of these other AI providers like XAI or Google Gemini, they are quote unquote OpenAI API compatible, which is a mouthful. But what that means is basically when you use a library, it's making API requests to OpenAI servers. When Google is OpenAI API compatible, it means you can change the URL in which you're sending these OpenAI chat requests to a Google domain. You don't have to change anything else of your code, but they return the same response format that OpenAI does so that you can switch to them easier. So I had spent a lot of effort like pulling in Google Gemini libraries and PHP, using them for to split my expenses. But then I realized I could rip out all of Google's extra code, literally change maybe 2 or 3 lines to configure my OpenAI library to point at Google's domain instead of OpenAI's domain, and change the API key to be the Google API key. So it feels like it's OpenAI, but it's Google under the hood, and that makes it 10 times easier to actually make these requests and iterate on different models. So I'm with you. I think 2.5 Flash and 2.5 Pro are excellent, incredible models, top of the leaderboard. And so you really would be unwise to use something different at the moment. Each use case has different kind of constraints, but right now, general purpose, latency, price per token, Google is killing it, and I'm excited to see them kind of continue to do well. I think I've spent a lot of effort to make it better, and I'm sensing it's only going to continue from here.
Yeah. And I think especially for folks that are using, like if they work at a place that uses Google Workspace, like
Hmm.
dig into those tools. And again, I think we should talk about Notebook LM a little bit in a separate podcast, but super cool tool, like really fun, especially for like non-technical people. It's more of like a knowledge based kind of thing. But yeah, we'll talk about that in a different podcast episode, because I could probably go pretty deep into how fun that's been.
Hmm.
Actually, it's actually one of my bookmarks. I'll touch on a little bit in my bookmark actually, but we'll save that for the end. What I wanted to chat a little bit about with this podcast episode was, and what I was working on, last few days, including over the weekend a little bit, was LangGraph, because I think this is actually a pretty significant library slash framework for, I say, accountants to know. And what I kind of say with that too is I think this is also recognizing that I think the role of an accountant, and not necessarily public accounting where like you have clients and you're working on your clients' books, but like people that are working at a company doing the accounting for that company. Um, I think that role is going to change. I think it's going to happen pretty fast. Accounting tends to move a little bit slower because we got to be careful. There's controls. There's, you got to be accurate. So get all that. But, the era and the time of doing things manually, just like the process of doing things, that's got to get changed a little bit. And so I think LangGraph is a really cool framework to kind of accomplish that.
Are you
And
telling
so
me that the accounting landscape is going to change? This sounds like some fear mongering.
well, I don't think it's fear mongering. I think it's a little bit of reality. I'm not, it reminds me of, there was that story that the longshoremen were striking because, there was some automation that was going to take place that they're already doing in China. But, there's a union, the longshore people, and all that to say, like, you can't fight technology. Like, it's coming,
Hmm.
So, like, all you're doing is delaying the inevitable. But LangGraph, I think we're going to touch on it here. It's not replacing accountants at all, but I think it's changing the skill set of what's important, I think. Um, because I've done and been a part of automations, pretty much all throughout my career. And, the way that they've been done in the past has had a lot of limitations. And so LangGraph, I think, solves a lot of those limitations. Plus also things like, chat being able to have non-coders be able to kind of get there a little bit more on their own. Not fully, but get there a little bit more on their own. So what LangGraph is, for those that don't know, it's basically a library or a framework. There's a Python library. I think there's also a JavaScript one, but I've been using Python. And basically, it really helps you kind of nicely outline a complicated process or a complex series of steps. And I think a lot of times for accountants and for accounting, tasks that you might have, you're doing kind of multi-step analysis or multi-step data manipulation to get a report into a journal entry or to get a report and run it through a series of checks. And what's a limiting factor with generative AI is that like you can't have guesses in accounting. Right? It's all dollars and cents, right? But what's nice about LangGraph is you can route to like paths, like specific paths for code to run. So you're not necessarily having AI do a analysis for you, but you can code this is what the steps are. And so that was a lot, but I think that's the first point to kind of hone in on is that you are not having generative AI like analyze something, or at least that's not my kind of first use case with this. But you can basically in code outline the series of steps with LangChain that will run, and that's always it's a fixed process. It's not generative AI doing its hallucinating, right? It's this is how I do my steps. It's A B C D E, and LangGraph just does a nice way to kind of put those things together.
I've used LangChain when it came out a long, long time ago. And when I look up LangGraph, which is a weird word, it looks like it's under the LangChain domain. So is LangGraph more the agent side of LangChain?
Yeah, so LangGraph, as I understand it, you actually don't have to use LangChain at all. You can use LangGraph like directly with, the agent SDKs from OpenAI or the other ones. But what LangGraph really is, it's a way to kind of, at least this is kind of how I've adopted it for accounting, is it's a way to kind of break up a series of steps that you might be doing and kind of chain them together. So kind of, kind of similar to LangChain, but they basically define nodes. So you think of it as like steps. You define those nodes, and then LangGraph kind of lets you put those together nicely where it's like, hey, this node goes to this node, and then that node goes to this node, and then it ends here. And so the specific kind of process that I was working on over the weekend was basically like a financial statement analysis where every month I have a person that like runs a report and they run a series of checks to make sure, hey, this makes sense. We are clear on these numbers here, blah, blah, blah. And then spits out an output that says, hey, thumbs up, we're good, or thumbs down, we're not good. And that's every single month. It's a consistent thing. All we're doing is changing the month that we're doing analysis for. And so what I was able to do was define like what are the steps in that process. Basically code that each step was a node, an individual node. So getting the financial statement data, that's a node. I used pandas, which you probably heard us talk about on this podcast before. It's like a data analysis library in Python. It can read Excel files beautifully. And so, get the financial statement data, had a pandas data frame. So that's hard. Like that's not, I shouldn't say hard coded, but that is not AI. That is just pure programming that's going and grabbing that data, right? So there's no hallucination. You're just grabbing the data. So that was the first node. The second node was, okay, what are our requirements? Like, what does this financial data need to look like? And so you'd code the second node. So basically, I think I have like 4 or 5 nodes that I made that make up this process that this individual was doing. And then you can kind of chain them together. And what the second part that's really nice about LangGraph is state management, which state management in the context of web development drove me crazy. That was always my frustration with
A
like
loaded
JavaScript
term for
libraries.
sure.
Yeah, but really it's basically, at least in the sense of LangGraph, it's like a persistent layer of data that goes all through your different nodes. So basically, as an example, not to get too technical here, but like person, when they ran this analysis, they needed to have the month. Like, what month are we running this for?
Like
March,
input.
February? Yeah. And basically, that was like part of the state. So every single time they go through that step or go through those nodes, that node can access things in the state. So it's like, okay, we are doing, if we say March, node B, or sorry, node A can say, okay, we're doing this as of March. And then when you get to node B, it can go access that state that you defined. And so it kind of like, you can kind of build this little brain as like state and access it in the different nodes. And so that's something that's really helpful too, because a lot of times in programming, at least in my experience with Python, it's like, you define these functions, and then some of the variables in those functions are only available in those functions. Otherwise you have to like return them and call them, and that can get kind of tricky for non-programmers. But like having state where you're like, hey, these are all the things I need to know as I do this process. I need to know the month. I need to have, what's my, if you have like a financial data, like what's my financial data, you can kind of outline all these different things that you need to know, and make up that state. And then as you go through your different nodes, you can kind of add to that state or change that state, which is pretty cool. So those two
How
things.
similar was it to like MCP agents? Because I'm hearing like individual nodes. I'm thinking MCP server with tools, or is this a different approach?
Yeah. Well, that's definitely where I'm kind of going with it. So like basically you have this, programmed out workflow that like you run it 100 times, you can get the same answer 100 times. So there's no AI involvement, right? But where I wanted to kind of take this was making this process that I outlined, with LangGraph, a tool for an AI agent. So basically, I can tell the agent, "Hey, run that process for me," and it'll know, based on the way that you define tools. And I was using LangChain for the tooling. You don't have to. Again, you could just use whatever SDK you want, but I was telling it like, okay, hey, I want to run this for March. And basically the only involvement with the agent is kind of trying to understand, what are you trying to do? And I only have one tool for this agent, so it's it's pretty easy. But obviously, as you get more and more tools, you have to be more aware of like, making sure your agent gets the right tool, right?
Hmm.
Um, but then basically also it kind of parses out what you're looking for. So you could say, oh, can you tell me what it was last month? And it kind of knows, okay, could you tell me what it was this month last year? And it kind of knows, okay, this month is April, but last year is
I see.
2024,
So it does
So
like the input analysis into feeding into the nodes, does like
yeah.
the human interface and chat interface to be able to call these things.
Yeah, and like that's super important in my experience, because a lot of the times automation fails or doesn't get adopted because people have a hard time running it on their computers. It's
Hmm.
not, again, for non-technical people, we don't have GitHub, we don't have, GitLab. We can't pull a repo down and run it. Most people don't know how to do that. It's just not part of the skill set that they were hired on for. But if you can make an agent that you can access in Slack, then you can just Slack that agent and say, hey, can you run that for me? And then boom, it'll run that process, which I think is a much more approachable way for non-technical people to still be able to get to like custom workflows and custom automation. Because no matter how good software is, there'll be no software that can satisfy every single process that you do. And so I think there's still lots of room for people being able to make their own automations, because a company might do something slightly different because they feel like they have to, or because they feel like it's important. But you shouldn't have to throw away any hope of automation on that. You should be able to, write these things in code. Again, Python, any language really, but Python is so approachable now. So many great libraries, and you can use LLMs to like help
Hmm.
write the code. I again, I'm not a programmer, but I got this thing fully working in a matter of like 2 or 3 days. And it's pretty complicated steps. Like there's a lot of steps involved. I think it's like 600 lines of code, and most of it is just the actual outlining of what the steps are. The agent piece of it is like, I don't know, 60 lines of code. But then basically, yeah, so having that lane graph be exposed as a tool to my agent, and then now the agent can run this process based on my input, which
So
is.
was it an official MCP server, or was the agent and tool that you described like built into their framework?
So I built the tool, like the actual LangGraph tool, and then exposed as a tool. So LangChain has like a decorator you can put on that
Hmm.
says, hey, this function is a tool. I don't know how it works under the hood, but
Hmm.
and then in your main program, when you make the agent, if it's LangChain does like, chat OpenAI as like a class, and then you define the model, you define the temperature, all that kind of stuff. Then you can define tools, and you can have it equal to
I see.
the tools
Okay.
that you import from your main, kind of code base that you did all the logic in.
Okay. So maybe it's not traditional official MCP server and MCP tool, but it functions the same without the label, it almost sounds like.
It's not MCP specifically, but it's exposing an agent to a tool that like I
Hmm.
made, and so
Yeah.
now this agent just has one tool, but you can also ask the agent, what's the weather like today, and it'll respond to you. So, it's a true
Yeah.
agent. It's not just,
Right.
me hitting, Python main.py on my computer, which doesn't really do anybody any good. But if you can port it and make it accessible, not now we're cooking with gas a little bit. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity in accounting for that, because there's so many things that we have just steps on. It's like I can't have a direct connection from system A to system B to import things. So I got to do this manually. Well, it's like you can do it manually, but you can code that manual process and then maybe
Mhm.
make it a tool. So that way, yeah, it's still manually being extracted and then manipulated, then imported. But at least you kind of can get rid of the heavy lifting that comes with just monkeying with the data, which sadly is a
Yeah.
lot of people's jobs.
Yeah, we're a big fan of automation. I think any process that takes data from one system, compares it with another, import, output, it's all fun, and it's all things that, like, hey, you're gonna do it, but how do you make it a little bit easier to work with? How can you share that with people? Because I even worked on my personal capital MCP server this weekend, and as we talked last time, I was running into literal AI output length limits. So Claude could only write 8,000 tokens. And part of those tokens was it chugging through my expenses, trying to literally write the expenses into the JavaScript code that I was trying to execute. And then I tried doing SQL. It kind of worked, but didn't really work. And I went back to the drawing board and I actually changed my MCP tool to not return JSON, but to return a CSV, because I personally thought the output tokens that the LM is looking at for JSON is very descriptive. So for every expense I had, there was a description, amount, and date. But on the next row, the same thing, description, amount, date. I could have less tokens and have AI parse it easier if I just had a header, and then under that was just a bunch of rows. And CSV is nice because we don't have a value, it's just a comma. So no space, really. So I changed that, and my tool is a lot better, which was cool. And I think when you're talking about the agent having the input, like choosing the month, I also found that to be extremely successful, because I could say things like, what did I spend last month? I'm not typing in like March 1st to March 31st. It just knows based on the current day, that it like equips you with so much general knowledge, that's how piecing all these things together makes it extremely valuable. Like, you can create this thing in LangGraph and you can choose the AI model. So like today we have fantastic models like O3, super high intelligence, Gemini 2.5 Pro, super high intelligence. Next month, we could have something with, in theory, 2 times the intelligence. Probably not, but you get the point. And your same workflow exists, but now your agent knows how to do things better, would know how to conversate better with you. Like, it's pretty incredible that you can build these building blocks, and then while you're building these things, the entire system gets better. You can change one line of your code, adopt a smarter agent, and now you have a reusable workflow with just increased knowledge. And I think that part is really, really exciting. And when we're building these flows, if it works in today's model, it's going to work very, very well in tomorrow's model. And you get the picture. The more we can bring to automations, the more real work we can do, because yes, it's important work. I think automation is always important work. But if you free yourself up from some of this mundane work, then you could focus on the bigger picture, have more automations running for you. Just like when I see these AI IDEs, I don't see it as the end of programming for me. To me, it's like, I'm going to write programs that'll write programs for me. And then I just, up the ladder I go, and who knows what I end up building. Like, it's such a stepping stone and multiplier that I think people, if you're excited about it, it gets you energized and you build stuff for yourself. And then you just kind of realize what's out there. It's a very kind of self-fulfilling loop.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, the need for programming skills in particular is still relevant, because as I was working on this automation, you have to be able to tell it like when to stop. I think I mentioned before, like, there was like a Ben Affleck quote where he was like, someone asked him if he was worried about AI taking over the movie producing industry, and he was like, no, because AI doesn't know when something is like done, when to say I'm finished, like this is
Mm-hmm.
perfect. Because it'll endlessly try to optimize and endlessly try to add features, and so you kind of have to know like enough to kind of get the job done. A lot of times, I was using Gemini to like help write the code and do all like the basic stuff, but like a lot of the actual logic and like figuring out, the actual code to write was myself, right? Because I know, like, as an example, a lot of times your general ledger will have account numbers, and like those account numbers kind of tell you what it is. So like, account number 1000 typically is like cash. That's just kind of basic. And so, you can you have to know, okay, if my cash accounts is like 1000 through 1000 or 1500, then, you can have to what I was doing in my code was saying total cash equals, and had a data frame filtering it for that conditional rule and then like summing off of it. So like you have to know your stuff still. Like, you can't just throw, at least not yet, throw a Gemini a process and have it just be perfect at it right away. You kind of have to break it down into steps and still code it, but then you can use LLMs to kind of help check your work, to kind of help you on if you get in a bind that you can't figure out right away. But you still have to do a lot of the actual logic yourself. And I think when I was talking about the skills that might change, I do think, and maybe this, I don't know if this is like bias or wishful thinking, but I do think that accounting will have a moment where it needs to be more programmatic. I'm not saying that we need to become programmers, but like I think as a necessary skill set, I think it's going to be important to know the basics of programming, the basics of APIs, of course, how to work with AI, obviously. But I just see our role being much more of, not necessarily the actual process of doing something, like the actual manual work, but like, analyzing it more, helping connect
Hmm.
the pieces more with these kinds of automations. So I think having someone who can, think critically about what they're doing, break something complicated down into simple steps, and ideally, write that out in code or pseudocode, and then work with an engineering team to kind of build that into a more, durable automation. I think that's what's going to be valuable in the future, because yeah, accounting has to be precise. We can't use generative AI everywhere. Like, we again have to
Hmm.
be tying things out to the dollars and cents.
Yeah, and if you do that today, you're an extremely valuable employee. So not MVP, but extremely valuable EVP, I guess. It took me a second there. So if you're creating these processes, defining them, I think it's a challenge to put yourself in like the AI's shoes, to take what might seem normal to you and just, like you mentioned, like certain specific account numbers or cash, like these assumptions, these contexts, how the business works, how your organization works. If you can distill that and frame the AI in a space that, here's a task, here's how we operate, here's what's important to us, here's what you shouldn't touch. There's various degrees in which you define the rules both as positive and negative, and prompt techniques and everything, and you go super deep into each of these layers. But at the end of the day, if you can piece together a prototype of something working, that's valuable to you, to your teammates, to the company, to the org, like, you are doing the right thing, and you're positioning yourself to become extremely valuable, because that's what companies are looking for. They're looking to adopt AI. They want you to come bring the idea, the project, to make it a no-brainer. Like, I think every single company on their balance sheet or in investor calls are just literally talking about AI, but they want to make something happen. If you can be on the ground, distilling these ideas into workflows, into tools, into agents, being that person to push AI forward and be an early adopter and tinkerer, you're going to, do pretty well, and you're going to be ahead of the curve. And once everyone else catches up, you're going to be much, much farther along and become, and probably retain like the high value that you had when you first started tinkering with AI. So again, something that I try to do in my day-to-day job, but like, be close to it, try it out. Literally, I think as Ben's describing this, sometimes I think in my head, like, what should I start automating? Because I always think of it, I do like thinking of it, but sometimes you get too in the weeds. You're doing something, you think, oh, this will take an hour, but maybe if I spent 3 hours automating it, that 1 hour might become 5 minutes in the future. And I think I would challenge everyone listening to the podcast, like, if there's any mundane workflow you're doing next week while you listen to the podcast, just challenge yourself. Say, how could I automate this? AI agents are here, tools are here, MCP servers are here. How could I distill what I'm thinking, what I'm working with, and make something that's automatable and shareable? Because that is going to be a huge, huge unlock, both at a company, working for yourself. Literally, it's just a workflow and a tool, and you are kind of the wielder of that tool that you create. So definitely very much empower yourself right now.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think my early automation, like this is pre AI, was like because I just straight up disliked something. I disliked the process, and there's like a
Hmm.
natural pain. So like, yeah, if people are listening and they have something that they just can't stand, that's a great candidate to just be
Yeah.
like, this let's get this off my plate as much as we can. And the one thing I didn't touch on too much, because I went a little bit long on LangGraph, but like, what's great about LangGraph too, and maybe this can be a separate follow-on topic, for future podcasts, but like human in the loop, is kind of a phrase that's coming more and more. You're seeing a lot more with these tools, because there's an acknowledgement that like AI can't do everything, or AI is great at the actual doing of some work, but the understanding and contextualizing that, sometimes like you need a professional, and like either just for pure comfort, because you don't trust the code, or you don't trust the AI, or it's just you're a professional, you've went to school. Like there is some things, like we don't have AGI yet, like we're not
Yeah.
there, and so like there's still a place for humans to kind of come in and be like, okay, let's check that before we proceed to the next step. So that's what human in the loop is. And LangGraph makes it really nice and easy to do that, because they have kind of checkpoints you can put in the nodes that tell you, or that tell the program, okay, stop here and like show something, or stop here and then get an input from the user to say continue, because that's something that's going to be more and more important too, I think, as people build out their custom automations.
Yeah, I've seen the same thing. Devin, the old like AI software engineering agent that came out late last year, kind of took Twitter by storm and thought software engineering is over. They recently came out with a newer version of Devin that almost exists like Cursor or Windsurf or Copilot. That is, again, like you mentioned, human in the loop. So it's writing code, trying to generate things, but prompting you, hey, does this look good? Where the previous version of Devin was hands off. You described it. It kind of chugged along like an intern and then came back with a final result, but it was slow, not correct, and didn't give you the kind of control you wanted. So I think, oddly enough, we have better models, but more human in the loop, which again seems backwards, but it's people understanding the power of the tools that get 80% of the way there. And with the 20% nudge of an expert or, a domain, kind of owner, then you get that full unlock that I think people were looking for. But from the outset of AI tools, they thought, oh, it's already going to do all this. But reality check, it's not there yet, but it will be. And I think human in the loop is definitely the basis for what we're using today. And MCP servers and tools are all powered by that, where every time my personal capital kind of MCP server wants to go look at some of my data from transactions to ask me, hey, can I run this tool? It's like, yes. Again, if you had a tool that deleted or modified files and you didn't have that ask, it could be deleting files that, maybe it shouldn't be deleting. So human in the loop is definitely here to stay. And I think probably in the next 6 months, we'll try to reduce that. But today, it's definitely something that's top of mind that I don't think many people are pushing stuff to production or having unsupervised agents. It's very, very much supervised. All right, so let's do it for bookmarks to kind of wrap it up today. I know we talked about a lot of stuff, so I'll kick it off. My bookmark today is Cursor 0.49. So the new trend of software is not to release a 1.0 ever. You release 1.0 version after many years. So Cursor is following that rule. They're at 0.49, and there's a Reddit post on the Cursor subreddit saying, oh my God, I basically am using O3, the new OpenAI model, and I'm spending $40 a day in Cursor because there's a new mode that you can basically pay for higher intelligence, and it costs per request or per prompt. And I'm quote unquote achieving more than I did with some of my past teams of 10 plus FANG engineers. So supposedly it's doing better than engineers at Facebook, Apple, Netflix, Google, the top, quote unquote, top tier tech companies. And I think this one went viral because we have new Cursor, new AI IDE, and new models. And together, again, like we talked about, the culmination of the tools and the intelligence produces fantastic results. And I myself have tried Cursor with the new Gemini 2.5 Pro Max mode, and we'll talk about it in a different podcast, but it's kind of the same thing, pay for intelligence. And my TLDR is it's really damn good and better than it was. I'm not sure it's going to replace 10 plus FANG engineers. I think that's a clear overshot. And like we talked about human in the loop, you're still directing and guiding this thing. No way is it going to be able to do 10 plus autonomous engineers work. So myth busted, but I think the consensus is there that we're getting to a spot where you can pump out a lot of stuff. And I know Ben was coding a lot this weekend. I'm sure he feels the same, that it's pretty damn good. So definitely pick it up.
Yeah. I mean, just like writing long, like nested for loops, like having to just not have to do that is so nice. Like just little things like that.
I don't
so
think
it
I
was
could go back to like not using it. I think I saw a tweet online that was like, I saw a guy in the plane like raw dogging like VS Code without like Copilot or any AI IDE. And I thought it was hilarious because I've also found like writing code manually just feels weird. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just super odd, but
I
yeah.
mean, it's the dopamine hit of like just going to the top. Like Python, you import the libraries at the top. I'm sure other programming languages do the same thing, but like, Cursor, I just write the code and I use those libraries, and then Cursor knows, okay, I got to import these at the top. So it just jumps up to the top and one tab imports like 15 lines. It's little things like that are just so
Wonderful.
nice. Yeah, it's great. Cool. So my bookmark is actually, so it's a bookmark to a YouTube video that someone on LinkedIn posted. So I'll try and find. I want to give them the credit. Byron Patrick. He's a CPA. I think someone that I was connected with liked his video, and it was really cool because it was actually my first intro into Notebook LM. We've mentioned it a little bit on this podcast. Just sparingly, it's probably worth a bigger episode. But it's really cool. It's a Google product, and what's really cool about it is you can give it certain context like PDFs, slides, Google Docs, and then it'll only use that context as like its knowledge base. So it won't do any hallucinations, and so it works really nicely. Again, for accountants, that got to be really specific and accurate. That means a lot. And what was really cool about it is, and what this person posted was, they made a podcast from the context. So this person uploaded a Deal versus Rippling, like a court case, which I think is like, I don't know the actual court case. I've heard about it, but there's some lawsuit going on that's kind of famous. Anywho, this person put the court case, these boring legal documents into Notebook LM, and then hit a button that says generate podcast. And it generated an AI podcast that was like basically two people talking back and forth about like the case. Sounded super realistic. And it's a great way, especially for someone who, I listen to podcasts. I walk my dog. I put on a podcast and I go walk, and just kind of nice to have it that way. And so reading a really boring court case sitting there on paper on my screen, not as exciting, but just having to be able to listen to it on a podcast is super cool. And so I was tinkering with this at my job. For those that don't know, I work at Zillow, and you could give it web pages. So I gave it Zillow's most recent 10K and generated a podcast out of it, and it talks about whatever we reported in the 10K, right? And it's pretty cool. Like it's actually like pretty awesome. And for those that don't know, a 10K is like an annual filing that companies do for like
We
their
all knew that.
financials. Oh, okay. Well, you never know. You never know, right? Just to be inclusive of everybody. But yeah, so it was really cool. And so I did that for a couple other like more internal documents. And yeah, like it would just, and then I listen to the podcast, air quotes podcast, and talk
It's
about
really
those
good.
things.
It's really
Yeah.
freaking good. I did one on a deep research query about how to market, split my expenses, and I think it was like a 17-minute podcast, bickering back and forth with some
Mhm.
character, and I was like, darn, I should use this more, but I hadn't gotten around to using it twice, but I really liked my first experience.
Yeah, it's funny. I put something in there that I had kind of written. I put in there like a code, like it was like a script that did all these things, and the podcast kind of roasted my code a little bit. It was like, oh,
Yeah.
this looks a little redundant. What is that about? I was like, geez. But
It
it
has a
was,
lot of character.
yeah, yeah. So it's pretty cool. And yeah, just again, the power of these things. It also has Notebook LM also has like mind maps, which are really cool. Can generate FAQs and briefing documents, push of a button. So yeah, really cool. And again, kudos to Byron Patrick for showing me that, because I hadn't even heard of it until I saw that. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think it's a way to be creative, to have boring stuff repackaged into a consumable format. That's kind of the take I have on Notebook LM, is make something that you would never ingest or like, read or listen to actually entertaining.
Yeah. I mean, just as we wrap up here, thinking about it with your MCP server for your financials. Can't remember what it was called. What's the one?
Personal capital.
Yeah, Personal Capital. Like if you could have those transactions and then have it generate a podcast episode. Hey, this is what you
That
spent
would be
this
good.
week. Yeah, like, like, hey, just that way you can hear it, because sometimes it's nicer just to hear
Yeah,
something than
yeah.
read it.
Hey, Bradley, cool it down. Chipotle too many times.
Yeah, yeah. I'd have a McDonald's. I get the Diet Cokes like every day. So yeah, it'd be probably pretty brutal. But
Yeah, Google, if you're listening, please put an API on that. We would love to use it and make it as cheap as your Gemini models, because those are a nice, great price point for us developers.
yeah, pretty cool stuff. Cool, awesome. Well, I think that'll wrap it up. Good stuff, Brad, as always. And
Yep.
yeah, till next time.
Till next time.
Thank you for listening to the Breaking Brothers podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, please leave us a 5-star review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever else you may be listening from. Also, be sure to subscribe to our show and YouTube channel so you never miss an episode. Thanks, and take care. All views and opinions by Bradley and Bennett are solely their own and unaffiliated with any external parties.